Seeds of Connection. Mumbai's skyline glittered against the evening sky as Nikhil Sharma adjusted his tie in the elevator mirror. At 32, he carried himself with the confident posture of a man who had built his architectural firm from scratch. Tonight's charity gala at the Grand Horizon Hotel wasn't his usual scene, but the cause, raising funds for the hematology department at LifeSpring Hospital, held profound significance for him. 7 years, he whispered to his reflection. 7 years since his father, Vikram Sharma, had battled leukemia and survived thanks to an anonymous stem cell donor. The doctors had explained that the donor wished to remain unnamed, but Nikhil had insisted on contributing to the hospital ever since, hoping that somehow his gratitude would reach the person who had given his family a second chance. Across the city, in a modest apartment filled with the scent of jasmine, Priya Malhotra carefully placed her stethoscope in her handbag. At 29, she had already established herself as a dedicated hematologist at LifeSpring Hospital. Her colleague, Dr. Ravi Mehta, had practically begged her to attend tonight's fundraiser. "You spend too much time with patients and not enough with the living," he had joked, though they both knew her dedication was what made her exceptional at her job. Priya smiled at the memory as she smoothed down her emerald silk sari. What she never told anyone, not even Dr. Mehta, was that she had once been more than just a doctor at LifeSpring. 5 years before joining the staff as a medical student, she had donated her stem cells to a stranger. It wasn't something she spoke about. In her mind, it was simply the right thing to do. The gratitude from the recipient's family had been overwhelming, coming in the form of anonymous thank you notes that the hospital forwarded to her. Eventually, she had requested that no more messages be passed along. Her gift wasn't meant to create obligation. The Grand Horizon ballroom hummed with conversation when Nikhil arrived. He nodded at familiar faces, business associates, fellow donors, hospital board members, while scanning the room for Dr. Mehta, his father's former physician, and now a friend. "Nikhil, so glad you could make it." Dr. Mehta's voice boomed as he approached, champagne glass in hand. "There's someone I'd like you to meet. One of our most promising hematologists. There she is." Priya felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to find Dr. Mehta gesturing enthusiastically. "Priya, this is Nikhil Sharma. His family has been one of our most generous supporters. Nikhil, Dr. Priya Malhotra, the newest star in our hematology department." Their handshake was brief, professional, but Nikhil found himself momentarily lost in Priya's warm brown eyes, which seemed to hold a depth of compassion he rarely encountered. "Dr. Malhotra, it's a pleasure. Your department saved my father's life." Priya's smile was genuine. "Please call me Priya. And I'm relatively new to the department, so I can't take credit for past miracles. But I'd love to hear your father's story sometime." Their conversation flowed easily from there, discussing Nikhil's architectural projects, Priya's research interests, their shared love of old Bollywood films. When the formal speeches began, they found themselves standing side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing in the crowded room. Later, as the evening wound down, Nikhil found himself reluctant to say goodbye. "Would you be interested in getting coffee sometime? I know a place near the hospital that makes excellent masala chai." Priya hesitated briefly. Her schedule was punishing, and she generally avoided mixing her professional and personal lives. But something about Nikhil's earnest expression made her nod. "I'd like that. Tuesday afternoons are usually my quieter time." As they exchanged numbers, neither could have imagined the intricate pattern that fate had already begun weaving around them, a pattern that had started years before, with an act of anonymous kindness and a family saved from heartbreak. Walking to her car, Priya gazed up at the star-filled sky. Something about tonight felt significant, though she couldn't quite place why. Perhaps it was simply the rare pleasure of connecting with someone who seemed to value the same things she did: compassion, purpose, quiet strength. Meanwhile, Nikhil called his father from the hotel lobby. "The gala went well, Dad. You should have come." "Next time, Beta," Vikram replied. "Did you make your usual speech about guardian angels?" Nikhil laughed. It had become a family joke, his insistence that whoever had donated the stem cells for his father's treatment was nothing short of an angel walking among humans. "Not this time," he said, thinking of Priya's thoughtful expressions and intelligent questions. "But I did meet someone interesting." Neither Nikhil nor Priya slept particularly well that night. their minds replaying fragments of conversation, finding unexpected comfort in the memory of a stranger who somehow didn't feel like a stranger at all. In their separate homes, under the same moon, they were unaware that their paths had already crossed once before. Invisibly, fundamentally in a hospital room 7 years ago, through cells that traveled from one body to another, carrying life and second chances within them. The seeds of connection had been planted long ago. Now they had finally begun to sprout. Blooming friendship. The small cafe near LifeSpring Hospital buzzed with Tuesday afternoon activity. Medical staff grabbing quick coffees, patients' families finding moments of respite, and in a quiet corner by the window, Nikhil and Priya sharing their second cup of masala chai. What had begun as a single post-gala coffee had evolved into a weekly ritual over the past 2 months. Their Tuesday afternoons had become a sanctuary of conversation that ranged from passionate debates about film to thoughtful discussions about life and loss. "So your mother passed when you were in medical school?" Nikhil asked, watching Priya stir honey into her tea. Today she looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from long hospital shifts. Priya nodded. "Cancer, ironic, isn't it? Daughter studies to fight the very thing that took her mother." She gave a small smile. "It's what pushed me toward hematology specifically. There's something redemptive about blood disorders. The way one person's healthy cells can literally save another person's life." Nikhil leaned forward. "That's exactly how I felt about my father's donor. Like this stranger performed a kind of magic, creating life where there might have been none." "You never found out who it was?" "No, Dad wanted to send gifts, letters. I wanted to thank them personally. But they requested anonymity. The hospital said that's quite common." He shrugged. "I respect their choice, but sometimes I wonder who they are. If we've ever crossed paths without knowing." A shadow crossed Priya's face, so quickly that Nikhil almost missed it. Before he could question it, his phone buzzed with a work emergency. A design issue at his latest project site required immediate attention. "I'm so sorry," he said, already gathering his things. "The contractor is threatening to halt construction if I don't resolve this today." Priya waved away his apology. "Go! Buildings don't build themselves." As he rushed out, Priya remained at the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. There had been many moments like this one over the past weeks, moments when she could have told him. Yes, donors often requested anonymity, but there was no hospital policy preventing her from revealing herself now. Yet something held her back. Their friendship was becoming precious to her, untainted by obligation or gratitude. How would it change if he knew? Autumn arrived with a vengeance, bringing torrential monsoon rains that flooded parts of Mumbai. Nikhil found himself working late one evening, battling against deadlines while the rain lashed against his office windows. His phone lit up with a message from Priya. "Stranded at the hospital. All cabs refusing pickups due to flooding. Might have to camp in the break room tonight." Without hesitation, he responded, "Stay put. I'll come get you." An hour later, his car splashed through puddles in the hospital parking lot. Priya rushed out, her dupatta held over her head in a futile attempt to stay dry. She collapsed into the passenger seat with a breathless laugh, raindrops clinging to her eyelashes. "My knight in shining Hyundai," she teased. "You really didn't have to do this. What kind of friend would I be if I left you sleeping on a hospital cot?" He navigated carefully through the waterlogged streets. "Besides, I'm on my way to check on my father. The power's out in his neighborhood, and I want to make sure he's okay." Priya's expression softened. "That's thoughtful of you. How is Vikram uncle these days?" It hadn't taken long for Priya to meet Nikhil's father. One Sunday lunch had turned into regular visits, with Vikram delighting in having a medical professional to discuss his recovery with. He'd taken to calling her Dr. Betty, Dr. Daughter, a nickname that brought a complicated joy to Priya's heart. "He's doing well. This month marks 7 years since his transplant." Nikhil's voice held reverence. The doctors initially gave him 3 years at best. Every day beyond that feels like borrowed time. They arrived at Vikram's apartment building to find the elderly man waiting in the lobby with a flashlight, stubbornly refusing the neighbor's offer to stay with them. "Ah, you've brought reinforcements," Vikram called when he spotted Priya. "Now I have 2 young people to fuss over me unnecessarily." The evening transformed into an impromptu gathering. By candlelight, they prepared a simple dinner from Vikram's refrigerator supplies before they spoiled. Priya impressed them both with her ability to create a flavorful vegetable pulao with limited ingredients. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Vikram asked, helping himself to a second serving. "My grandmother. After my mother died, I spent summers with her in Dehradun. She believed cooking was a form of meditation." Priya passed the raita to Nikhil. She also believed food made with love had healing properties. "Smart woman," Vikram nodded approvingly.
Speaking of healing, Dr. Mehta mentioned you're working on research about improving stem cell transplant outcomes.
Priya explained her work while Nikhil watched the animated way her hands moved as she spoke. He'd never met anyone who cared so deeply about their profession, who viewed medicine not just as science but as a sacred trust. Later, as the rain continued to drum against the windows and Vikram dozed in his armchair, Nikhil and Priya sat on the balcony, sheltered from the downpour. "Thank you," Nikhil said quietly, "for everything tonight. I barely did anything. Just threw together whatever was in the fridge, not just the food. The way you are with my father? You listen to him. Really listen." He hesitated. Since his illness, many people treat him differently, like he's fragile or already gone. You treat him like he's still fully here. Because he is, Priya said simply. Being sick doesn't diminish who you are. Sometimes it reveals the strongest parts of you. In the dim light, Nikhil studied her profile, the determined set of her jaw, the gentleness around her eyes. Something shifted in his chest, a recognition that what he felt for Priya had evolved beyond friendship, but the moment wasn't right for such revelations. When the power finally returned around midnight, Nikhil drove Priya home. Standing at her apartment door, an awkward moment stretched between them, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "Tuesday chai next week?" He finally asked. Priya smiled. "I'll be there." "And Nikhil? Your father is lucky to have you. Not everyone would drive through a flood to check on their parent. Or a friend," he added meaningfully. After he left, Priya leaned against her closed door, conflicted emotions washing over her. Their friendship had bloomed into something beautiful and unexpected. She'd found herself sharing things with Nikhil that she rarely discussed with anyone. Her mother's death, her professional dreams, her fears. But the unspoken truth grew heavier with each passing day. The stem cells that saved Vikram Sharma's life had come from her body. The anonymous donor they spoke of with such reverence was standing right before them. As their friendship deepened into something more, Priya wondered if she had waited too long to reveal the truth. Would Nikhil understand her silence, or would he see it as a betrayal of trust? And would the man who was quickly claiming her heart be able to separate his gratitude from his affection? Some truths once spoken changed everything, and Priya wasn't certain if she was ready for everything to change. Hearts Entwined Spring arrived in Mumbai with a riot of colors, mirroring the blossoming relationship between Nikhil and Priya. What had begun as Tuesday chai sessions had expanded to weekend outings, impromptu dinners, and late-night phone calls that often stretched until dawn. On a warm April evening, they strolled through hanging gardens after dinner, the city lights twinkling below them like earthbound stars. Their hands had found each other somewhere along the path, fingers intertwined with the easy familiarity of two people who had stopped questioning whether they belonged together. "Do you believe in fate?" Nikhil asked suddenly, his voice thoughtful as they paused to look out over the Arabian Sea. Priya considered the question carefully. "As a doctor, I'm trained to believe in science and measurable outcomes and evidence-based decisions." She squeezed his hand. "But there are moments when science falls short of explaining. This?" He turned to face her, eyebrow raised playfully. "Us," she clarified. "The statistical probability of us meeting, of connecting the way we have." "It's—" She trailed off, unable to find the right words. Nikhil stepped closer. "Improbable yet inevitable." "Exactly." Her voice softened. "Sometimes I feel like we've known each other much longer than 8 months." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. "Maybe we have in some other life." The kiss that followed felt both like their first and like coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, Priya rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Guilt twisted inside her. The secret she continued to keep was becoming harder to justify, even to herself. "Nikhil, there's something," she began. "I love you," he interrupted. the words tumbling out as if he couldn't contain them any longer. I didn't plan to say it tonight, but I can't keep pretending this is just friendship evolving naturally. It's more than that. It's been more than that for months. Joy and anguish battled within her. How could she burden this perfect moment with her revelation? I love you too, she whispered instead, making a silent promise to tell him soon. Very soon. 2 months later, Nikhil invited Priya to dinner at the rooftop restaurant where they'd had their first official date. The evening held a nervous energy. Nikhil seemed distracted, checking his pocket repeatedly, stumbling over simple questions. Is everything all right? Priya finally asked. You've barely touched your food. Nikhil took a deep breath. I had this whole speech prepared about how you've changed my life, how I never imagined finding someone who understands me so completely. He reached across the table for her hand. But sitting here now, looking at you, all those carefully rehearsed words seem inadequate. Before Priya could respond, he was out of his chair, kneeling beside her table. The restaurant fell silent as other diners realized what was happening. Priya Malhotra, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands as he produced a small velvet box. You walked into my life as a brilliant doctor, became my dearest friend, and now you're the love of my life. Will you marry me? The ring caught the candlelight, a solitaire diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires, elegant and understated, perfectly aligned with her taste. Tears blurred Priya's vision as overwhelming love pushed aside her fears and doubts. Yes, she breathed. Yes, of course I will. Applause erupted around them as Nikhil slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, his face radiant with joy. Later that night, they shared the news with Vikram, who embraced Priya with tears in his eyes. I already considered you family, the older man said warmly. Now it will just be official. As wedding preparations began, Priya found herself caught in a whirlwind of activity. Both families embraced the engagement enthusiastically. Priya's father, a widower who had raised her alone after her mother's death, was particularly moved by Nikhil's traditional request for his daughter's hand. He reminds me of myself at that age, Janardhan Malhotra confided to Priya during a shopping trip for wedding clothes. The way he looks at you, like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life. Those words haunted Priya as weeks turned into months, and her secret remained untold. Each time she resolved to tell Nikhil the truth, something intervened: a family dinner, wedding planning urgencies, work emergencies. The right moment never seemed to materialize, and with each passing day, the revelation became more daunting. One evening, 4 months into their engagement, they sat in Nikhil's apartment reviewing guest lists. Priya watched as he added Dr. Mehta's name, followed by several other doctors from the hematology department. We should invite Dr. Singh as well, Nikhil mused. He was Dad's primary physician during the transplant. Priya nodded, her throat tight. Nikhil, speaking of the transplant, her phone rang, the hospital emergency line. A young patient with acute myeloid leukemia had taken a turn for the worse. The conversation would have to wait. Again. As their December wedding date approached, Priya's anxiety intensified. She finally confided in Dr. Mehta, the only person at the hospital who knew she had been Vikram's donor. You need to tell him, the older doctor advised gently. Secrets have a way of revealing themselves at the worst possible moments. I know. Priya sighed, rubbing her temples. I never meant for it to go this far. In the beginning, it seemed unnecessary to mention it. Then as we grew closer, I worried it would change how he saw me. And now you fear he'll think your entire relationship is built on deception. Dr. Mehta finished for her. The longer you wait, the more difficult this becomes. She knew he was right. That night she made a decision. After their engagement ceremony that weekend, she would tell Nikhil everything. First, she needed to gather her medical records as proof. It wasn't that she thought he wouldn't believe her, but having documentation would make the conversation more straightforward, less emotional. The engagement ceremony was a joyous affair, with both families coming together to celebrate their union. Amid the festivities, Priya watched Nikhil laughing with his father, their resemblance striking in profile. Vikram had gained weight since his illness, his complexion healthy, his energy boundless. It was hard to imagine him as the gaunt, fragile man she had never actually seen, but whose medical file she had memorized before making her donation. Later, as guests began to leave, Nikhil pulled her aside. I have a surprise for you, he whispered, his eyes bright with excitement. Pack a small bag for tomorrow. Just overnight. I'm kidnapping you for 24 hours. Kidnapping me? We have cake tastings tomorrow and the florist, all rescheduled, he assured her. Your father approved the plan. One day away from wedding madness, just the two of us. How could she refuse such an offer? The revelation could wait one more day, Priya decided. One perfect day together before she potentially changed everything. The next morning, Nikhil drove them to a secluded beachside resort in Alibag. They spent the day walking along the shore, swimming in the private pool of their luxury cottage, and simply existing together in peaceful companionship. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, Nikhil wrapped his arms around her from behind. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. For what? For saying yes. For loving me. For being the kind of person who dedicates her life to saving others. His voice held such reverence that Priya's eyes filled with tears. I keep thinking about how lucky I am to have found you. In that moment, Priya almost told him. The words rose to her lips, but as she turned in his arms, the look of pure adoration in his eyes stopped her. Just one more perfect night, she told herself. Tomorrow, back in Mumbai, she would tell him everything. Neither could have known that fate had its own timeline. That back in their apartment, Nikhil's sister was dropping off wedding invitation samples, and that while looking for a pen to leave him a note, she would accidentally knock over a stack of Priya's medical files that had been hidden in a drawer, files that were about to change everything. Hurt and confused, but I was wrong to react the way I did. Priya's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I should have told you sooner. I was just so afraid of losing you, of having you look at me differently. And I did exactly what you feared, he acknowledged ruefully. But Priya, this doesn't change how I feel about you. If anything, knowing the full truth only makes me love you more, though I didn't think that was possible. She leaned against his shoulder, relief washing through her. Where do we go from here? Nikhil turned to face her fully, cupping her face in his hands. We get married as planned. We build a life together, knowing that what brought us together wasn't just chance or coincidence, but something much more profound. He smiled softly. My father calls it destiny, and what do you call it? She asked, her eyes searching his. I call it the greatest gift I've ever received, he answered, drawing her close. Twice over. As they kissed beneath the flowering tree, surrounded by the hospital where their story had unknowingly begun 7 years earlier, both felt the disparate threads of their lives finally weaving together into a single, unbreakable cord, one strong enough to bind them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Hidden threads, Nikhil returned to his apartment alone the following evening. Still basking in the afterglow of their perfect getaway, Priya had been called directly to the hospital for an emergency with one of her young patients, promising to come over as soon as her shift ended. The apartment felt emptier without her presence, though traces of her were everywhere, her medical journals stacked neatly on the coffee table, her favorite tea mug in the dish rack, the faint scent of her jasmine perfume lingering in the air. He spotted the wedding invitation samples on the kitchen counter, along with a note from his sister Tanvi. Left these for you to review. Call me when you decide. P.S. Sorry about the mess in the study. Knocked over some papers while looking for a pen. Of you curious, Nikhil wandered into his home office. The mess was minimal, a folder of papers that had slid partly under his desk. As he knelt to gather them, his eyes caught on a hospital letterhead. Thinking they were research papers Priya had brought home, he began to organize them before returning them to her. Then a name jumped out at him, Vikram Sharma. His father's name. Confused, Nikhil sat at his desk and examined the papers more carefully. They were donor records, stem cell donation records dated 7 years earlier. His heart began to race as he read further, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Donor ID, PM0594. Blood type, B positive HLA. Match 1010 compatibility with recipient. S7821 donation date, November 12, 2018. Donor status, anonymous by request. His fingers trembled as he turned to the next page. A consent form for the donation procedure, signed by Dr. Priya Malhotra, age 22, medical student at Mumbai University. The room seemed to tilt around him. Priya. His Priya was the anonymous donor who had saved his father's life. The mysterious guardian angel his family had wondered about for years had been sitting across from him at every Tuesday chai, had been beside him at family dinners, had accepted his proposal of marriage, all while knowing the truth. For hours, Nikhil sat motionless, documents spread before him. As the sky outside transitioned from dusk to full darkness, memories replayed in his mind with new context. Priya's strange expression when he'd mentioned his father's donor, her seemingly coincidental interest in hematology, her immediate connection with Vikram. What he had attributed to compassion and coincidence now appeared in a different light. Why hadn't she told him? The question circled his mind relentlessly. Was their entire relationship built on a secret mission of hers to monitor her donation's recipient? Was her interest in him genuine or motivated by some sense of medical curiosity? The rational part of him rejected these suspicions, but hurt and confusion clouded his judgment. The sound of keys in the door jolted him back to the present. Priya entered, her face weary from her hospital shift but brightening when she saw him, until she registered his expression and the papers on the desk before him. "Nikhil," she whispered, her bag slipping from her shoulder to the floor. "I can explain." He looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed and confused. 7 years, he said quietly. 7 years. I've wondered about the person who saved my father, wondered if I'd ever get to thank them properly. His voice cracked. "And it was you all along," Priya moved toward him hesitantly. "I was going to tell you. Tomorrow, actually. I've been trying to find the right moment. The right moment?" Nikhil stood abruptly. "We've known each other for over a year. We're engaged to be married in 2 months. There have been hundreds of right moments, Priya." "I know." She reached for his hand, but he stepped back. "At first I didn't tell you because it didn't seem relevant. We were just two people who met at a charity event. Then as we became friends, I worried it would change things between us, that you'd feel obligated to me somehow. So instead you let me fall in love with you without knowing the whole truth?" The hurt in his voice was palpable. "Did you ever plan to tell me? Or were you going to let me marry you without knowing who you really are?" Tears spilled down Priya's cheeks. "That's not fair. You know who I am. This one fact doesn't change everything else we've shared. But it changes how we started," Nikhil insisted. "It changes the story of us." "No, it doesn't." Priya's voice strengthened. "I donated anonymously because I never wanted acknowledgement or gratitude. When we met at that gala, I had no idea who you were. Dr. Mehta introduced us without knowing the connection. It wasn't until you mentioned your father's transplant that I realized. And you said nothing. By then, I was already drawn to you, to your kindness, your passion for your work, the way you cared for your father." She wiped at her tears. "I was afraid if I told you, you'd question everything about us, that you wouldn't trust that my feelings were real and not motivated by some bizarre sense of responsibility." Nikhil paced the length of the room, trying to sort through his chaotic thoughts. Did my father know? Did Dr. Mehta arrange our meeting on purpose? No. Priya's denial was emphatic. Nobody knew except Dr. Mehta, and he didn't make the connection until months after we started dating. He's been encouraging me to tell you. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words and raw emotion. Finally, Nikhil gathered the papers and held them out to her. "I need time to process this," he said, his voice controlled but distant. "I'm not questioning that you love me, Priya, but I am questioning whether we can build a marriage on a foundation that includes such a significant omission." Priya took the papers, her hands trembling. "I understand," she managed, though her heart was breaking. "For what it's worth, I never meant to hurt you. Every moment we've shared has been real for me. Every feeling genuine." As she turned to leave, Nikhil called after her. "Why did you do it?" "The donation? You were just a medical student." She paused at the door, not turning around. "My mother died waiting for a match that never came. After that, I registered as a donor for everything. Blood, platelets, stem cells, organs. When they called to say I was a match for someone, there was never any question of refusing." Her voice softened. "I didn't know then that saving your father would eventually lead me to you. But I'm not sorry it did." With that, she left, the gentle click of the door closing behind her feeling more final than a slam. The following days passed in a fog of misery for both of them. Priya threw herself into her work at the hospital, staying long hours to avoid returning to her empty apartment. Nikhil buried himself in architectural drawings, creating designs until his eyes burned and his hand cramped around his pencil. A week after their confrontation, Nikhil found himself at his father's home for their regular Sunday lunch. He hadn't told Vikram about the discovery or the rift with Priya, but his father knew him too well to be fooled by his attempted normalcy. "All right," Vikram said after watching his son push food around his plate for 20 minutes. "What's happened between you and Priya? And don't tell me nothing. You look like you haven't slept in days and she's stopped calling to check on my medications." Reluctantly, Nikhil explained everything. As he spoke, he expected shock or surprise from his father. Instead, Vikram's expression shifted from concern to something like understanding, and finally to disappointment, not in Priya, but in his son. "So let me understand," Vikram said when Nikhil finished. "You're upset because the woman you love turns out to be not only the compassionate doctor you fell for, but also the person who saved my life years before you even met her?" Put that way, Nikhil's anger seemed ridiculous. "It's not that simple, Dad. She kept this from me. For months. And why do you think she did that?" Vikram's question was gentle but probing. "She said she was worried I'd feel obligated to her, that I wouldn't trust my own feelings." "And weren't those valid concerns?" "Look at how you're reacting now." Nikhil had no response. His father continued, more softly now. "Beta, when I was sick, do you remember what the doctors told us about finding a donor? That it was like finding a needle in a haystack," Nikhil recalled. "The chance of finding a perfect match outside family was minimal. 1 in 20,000, Vikram nodded. Those were the odds. And yet somewhere across the city, a young woman, a stranger, was a perfect match. Her cells now live in my body, keeping me alive." He placed his hand over Nikhil's. "Some people would call that science. I call it destiny." "Dad, no, listen to me. I'm an old man who got a second chance at life because of Priya's selflessness. But you—" His eyes grew misty. "You got a first chance at a love most people never find. Are you really going to throw that away because she was afraid of losing you?" That night, Nikhil stood on the balcony of his apartment watching the city lights flicker below. His father's words echoed in his mind, along with memories of Priya, her laughter, her determination, her unwavering support through every challenge they'd faced together. He thought about what she had said. "I didn't know then that saving your father would eventually lead me to you." The threads of their lives had been intertwined long before they ever met, connected by an act of extraordinary generosity that asked for nothing in return. Picking up his phone, Nikhil sent a simple text. "Can we talk?" Her response came almost immediately. "I'm at the hospital until midnight. Meet me in the garden courtyard after?" The hospital garden was deserted when he arrived, save for a solitary figure sitting on a bench beneath a flowering jacaranda tree. Priya looked up as he approached, her face pale and tired in the soft lighting, but still the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. Without a word, he sat beside her and took her hand in his. For several moments, they simply existed together in the quiet night, reconnecting through touch what had been severed by misunderstanding. "I'm sorry," they both said simultaneously, then shared a small hesitant smile. "You have nothing to apologize for," Nikhil continued. "You gave a part of yourself to save my father, expecting nothing in return. And then you gave your heart to me again, asking for nothing." He squeezed her hand. "I was hurt and confused, but I was wrong to react the way I did." Priya's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I should have told you sooner. I was just so afraid of losing you, of having you look at me differently. And I did exactly what you feared," he acknowledged ruefully. "But Priya, this doesn't change how I feel about you. If anything, knowing the full truth only makes me love you more, though I didn't think that was possible." She leaned against his shoulder, relief washing through her. "Where do we go from here?" Nikhil turned to face her fully, cupping her face in his hands. "We get married as planned. We build a life together, knowing that what brought us together wasn't just chance or coincidence, but something much more profound." He smiled softly. "My father calls it destiny. And what do you call it?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "I call it the greatest gift I've ever received," he answered, drawing her close, twice over. As they kissed beneath the flowering tree, surrounded by the hospital where their story had unknowingly begun 7 years earlier, both felt the disparate threads of their lives finally weaving together into a single, unbreakable cord, one strong enough to bind them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Destiny's tapestry. The morning of Nikhil and Priya's wedding dawned with unexpected serenity after days of Mumbai's characteristic December humidity. Sunlight filtered through the gauzy curtains of Priya's childhood bedroom, where she sat before the mirror as her aunts fussed over her hair and makeup. The traditional red and gold wedding lehenga spread around her like a pool of fire, embroidered with intricate patterns that had taken artisans months to create. "You look like your mother," Janardhan Malhotra said from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. In his hands he held a small wooden box. She would have been so proud today. The room cleared as he entered, giving father and daughter a moment of privacy. Janardhan opened the box to reveal a delicate gold Mangal Sutra, the sacred necklace that symbolized marriage in their culture. "This was your mother's," he explained, "and her mother's before that. 4 generations of Malhotra women have worn this on their wedding day." He placed it carefully among Priya's wedding jewelry. Shalini always said it brought luck and lasting love. Priya touched the necklace gently, feeling connected to the mother she had lost too soon. "I wish she could be here. She is in her own way." Janardhan smiled sadly. "Just as she was with you when you made the decision to become a donor all those years ago." Priya looked up surprised. "You knew about that?" "Of course I knew. You were barely 22, still in medical school. They needed parental consent for the procedure." He sat beside her. "I was so proud of you that day. Your mother had just passed, and instead of closing yourself off to the world, you opened your heart even wider." "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "You asked me not to," he said simply. "You were adamant that it remain anonymous, that it be about the gift, not the recognition." He took her hands in his. "And now, by some miracle, that selfless act led you to the love of your life. If that's not destiny, I don't know what is." Across the city, in his family home, Nikhil was experiencing his own moment of reflection as his father helped him adjust the ornate turban that completed his wedding attire. "The last time we did this, I was too weak to stand for more than a few minutes," Vikram recalled, smoothing the fabric. "Your cousin's wedding, remember? 3 months after my transplant." Nikhil nodded, remembering how frail his father had been, how every family gathering had felt precious, borrowed. "I never imagined I'd live to see your wedding day," Vikram continued, "to meet the woman who would become my daughter-in-law." His hand stilled on Nikhil's shoulders, "and to discover she's the very same person who made all of this possible. It still feels unreal sometimes," Nikhil admitted. "Like a story too perfect to be true. The best stories often are." Vikram's eyes crinkled with emotion. "I have something for you. A gift for Priya, actually." He retrieved a small velvet pouch from his pocket. "It belonged to your mother." Inside was a pair of diamond and emerald earrings that Nikhil instantly recognized from old family photographs. "Dad, these were Mom's favorites. She wore them on our wedding day." Vikram nodded. "Your mother would have loved Priya, not just for what she did for our family, but for who she is. Strong, compassionate, brilliant." He closed Nikhil's fingers around the pouch. "These should belong to your wife now." The wedding venue transformed the garden of a historic Mumbai mansion into an enchanted wonderland. Marigold and jasmine garlands hung from ancient banyan trees, their scent mingling with incense in the air. Hundreds of guests gathered under a canopy of fairy lights and flower arrangements. But as Priya walked toward the mandap where Nikhil awaited her, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Their eyes met across the distance, and in that moment every doubt, every fear, every question about their unusual journey evaporated. This, Priya thought, was always where they were meant to be. During the ceremony, as they circled the sacred fire 7 times, each circle representing a promise, a commitment, a prayer for their life together, Nikhil whispered to her, "Do you remember what you said when I asked if you believed in fate?" "That as a doctor I believe in science," she whispered back. "But that science couldn't explain us. I think today proves your point." He smiled, his eyes never leaving hers. "Science brought us together, your cells literally, flowing through my father's veins, but what kept us together was something much more inexplicable. Love," she said simply. "Love," he agreed, when it came time to exchange personal vows, a modern addition to their otherwise traditional ceremony. Nikhil surprised everyone by producing a small vial tied with a red ribbon. "Priya," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering, 7 years ago you gave a part of yourself to save my father, never expecting anything in return. Today I offer you this." He handed her the vial, It's a soil sample from the foundation of every building I've designed, a small piece of every dream I've built, just as you gave a piece of yourself to rebuild our family's dreams. Tears glistened in Priya's eyes as she accepted his unique gift. And I promise, Nikhil continued, that every foundation we lay together, our home, our family, our future, will be built on complete truth and trust. For her vow, Priya presented Nikhil with a small crystal paperweight that enclosed a delicate double helix structure made of gold wire. DNA, she explained. The blueprint of life, unique to each of us yet connecting all of humanity through common threads. Her voice strengthened as she continued. 7 years ago, my cells became part of your family's story without either of us knowing. Today, I give you this as a symbol that our lives are now permanently intertwined, by choice, by love, and perhaps by a design greater than either of us can comprehend. There wasn't a dry eye under the canopy as they completed their vows. Dr. Mehta, seated in the front row, dabbed discreetly at his tears, marveling at the extraordinary culmination of what had begun in his hospital years earlier. The reception celebration continued well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and joyous reunions. As midnight approached, Nikhil and Priya slipped away from the festivities to a quiet corner of the garden, seeking a moment of peace before joining their overnight wedding party train to Udaipur, where they would spend their honeymoon. Happy? Nikhil asked, wrapping his arms around his wife as they gazed up at the star-filled sky. Beyond words, Priya sighed contentedly, leaning back against his chest. Though I still can't believe your father's speech. I thought I would dissolve into tears right there at the dinner table. Vikram's toast had been unexpected and moving, recounting not just his illness and miraculous recovery, but revealing to their assembled guests the extraordinary connection that had existed between bride and groom long before they ever met. I've spent 7 years wondering how to properly thank my anonymous donor, Vikram had said, raising his glass toward Priya. Now I know the answer was simple all along. I just needed to raise a son worthy of her love. The revelation had caused a ripple of amazed whispers followed by enthusiastic applause. What might have once been Priya's closely guarded secret had transformed into the cornerstone of their love story, embraced and celebrated by everyone who heard it. Do you regret that everyone knows now? Nikhil asked, sensing her thoughts. Priya shook her head. No, it's strange. I spent so long protecting that secret, afraid of how it might change things. But now that it's in the open, I feel like a lighter. Like the final piece of our puzzle has fallen into place. A comfortable silence enveloped them as they contemplated the journey that had brought them to this moment. The scientific miracle that had saved Vikram's life, the chance meeting at a charity gala, the friendship that blossomed into love, the revelation that nearly tore them apart, and finally, the understanding that their story was all the more precious for the unique way it had unfolded. What do you think happens next? Nikhil murmured against her hair. Now that we've discovered our destiny and fulfilled it? Priya turned in his arms, her eyes reflecting the starlight above. I don't think destiny is something you fulfill once and then it's done, she said thoughtfully. I think it's more like a tapestry that keeps being woven throughout our lives, pattern building upon pattern. So we're just getting started? Exactly, she smiled. Think about it. If one small decision 7 years ago could set all of this in motion, imagine what other connections are forming right now, what other threads are being woven into our future. Nikhil considered this, his expression turning playful. Like whether the child we might have someday will inherit my architectural eye or your medical brilliance. Or both, Priya laughed. Though hopefully not my stubbornness, or my terrible singing voice, he added, making her laugh harder. In the distance, they could hear their families calling for them, the wedding party ready to depart. But for just a moment longer, they remained still, savoring the perfection of being together, united not just by the ceremonies of the day but by the extraordinary journey that had brought them to each other. Ready to begin the next chapter? Nikhil asked, offering his hand. Priya laced her fingers through his, feeling the unfamiliar but welcome weight of her wedding ring. With you? Always. As they walked back toward their waiting loved ones, Priya thought about all the seeming coincidences that had aligned to bring them together, her mother's illness that inspired her to become a donor, her medical training that led her to LifeSpring Hospital, the charity gala where they first met. What had once seemed like random events now appeared as essential steps on a path that had always been leading them to each other. Science could explain how Priya's stem cells had saved Vikram's life. Medicine could detail the procedure that had transferred her healthy cells into his failing body. But nothing could fully explain the miracle that had brought her and Nikhil together years later, or the love that had bloomed between them against all odds. Some would call it coincidence. Others, like Vikram, would call it destiny. Priya and Nikhil simply called it their story, unique, imperfect, and more beautiful than anything they could have written for themselves. And as they joined their families and friends, surrounded by love and celebration, both knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning. The tapestry of their lives would continue to be woven, thread by golden thread, into a future neither could fully imagine but both embraced with open hearts and entwined hands. Sometimes love stories began before we even knew it. Sometimes the truest connections were forged in silence and sacrifice long before they blossomed into words and promises. And sometimes the most extraordinary gift one person could give another was not just life itself, but the chance at a love that transcended explanation, a love written in the very cells of their being.